In the news this week, calls for compassion. Activists demand empathy as Mark McGowan wants Tent City to be closed.
The Fish Army's move to seagrass seeding to stop the Sound's development. A WAMN News exclusive report.
What's coming up? Deputy Lord Mayor Sandy Angie on the Australia Day debate.
And on Western Perspective, an Aboriginal activist's extended interview on homelessness. Plus, Dr. Andrew Miller's COVID comment.
This is the Evening News with Ivan Leung and Sarah Smith.
Good evening. After weeks of congregation, Fremantle's Tent City for the homeless has been dismantled following the state government's intervention. As stakeholders are trying to avoid a repeat of the Harrison Island cleanup several years ago, this incident has again kick-started the difficult conversation of poverty and mistreatment of Indigenous Australians. In this exclusive report, Nelson Liu begins the dialogue.
Moved on, but still unresolved. Fremantle's homeless ordered out of its tent city as demands continue for compassion and permanent housing.
Mr Premier, try and find some humanity.
Indigenous advocates have slammed the government's eviction of the camp this weekend, with around half of the homeless Aboriginal.
I'd like to know where they're going to move them on to.
They've hit out at claims the camp was illegal.
When we talk about illegal on a little park anywhere, let's talk about the truth. Start truth telling of who's illegal. Because what I deem illegal is what happened to our people. Our people were not homeless before this country was invaded. We lived and survived, but we've been forced into Western culture, Western way of life, and now we're not being ours.
In the week, the state government butted heads with the City of Fremantle and advocates of Pioneer Park's homeless. The government's taken control of the park from Fremantle Council. On Saturday morning, the park empty, WA Police moving on the campers. Permanent housing still remains an issue, with 15,000 houses still needed. The City of Fremantle has called for a compassionate approach after criticisms from Premier Mark McGowan.
I don't want to see a situation like Harrison Island again. That's in no one's interest.
And it wants cooperation, claiming a lack of action across consecutive governments. Mr McGowan says the homeless are being supported.
We have great sympathy for people who are homeless, and they look to support them into a form of accommodation and over time transition them into more permanent accommodation.
But he's continued to slam Tent City organisers.
The organisers certainly didn't want it solved. They just want to protest.
But with the March election around the corner, there are hopes there will be permanent housing soon.
House them or put them somewhere, where they are safe and they've got a roof over their head.
Meanwhile, residents and ratepayers are preparing to submit breaches to the State Administrative Tribunal against Fremantle Council over handling of the campsite. Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
The Maritime Union and Fish Army are announcing further plans to prevent the construction of the Cockburn Sound Harbour.
However, the state government still stands ready to go ahead with the 2030 construction. Kit Sanders reports.
Tim Barlow of the Fish Army has revealed further plans to impede and stop the construction of the controversial outer harbour. Activists have previously urged the government to cease their plans as the proposed site is an ecological hotspot, but now plan to further seed the area with seagrass.
And Fish Army has always said, for that matter, that if you gave us 5 years, we would seed the sound with seagrass and make it virtually impossible for them to put something there. So that's our plan from this point on.
Ports Minister Alana McTiernan made a statement saying that Fremantle Port was nearly at a crunch point and that the government will invest $29.5 million into maintaining and modelling the aquatic environment. But Mr Barlow disagrees.
Harbour to go ahead, the premise is that every man, woman and child in Western Australia must triple their consumption. Triple their consumption. Fremantle, as it stands, is capable of servicing a city the size of Greater Sydney.
The Maritime Union of Australia is also concerned about the proposed port and its impact on the jobs of dock workers.
Yes, I do. I mean, to plant more seagrass down there, to make it viable, it can be pristine, the snapper spawning, all that stuff, penguins, and I believe I've seen a whale down there. I've got no apologies to make on behalf of my union. We're environmentalists, we're trade unionists, and we want permanent jobs, not robots.
10 years is a long time, and many things could change between then and now for dock workers, environmentalists, and Perth's trade future. Kit Sanders, WAMN News.
Australia Day 2021 is coming up this week, but the debate surrounding the day is still no closer to being resolved. I spoke with Perth's Deputy Lord Mayor Sandy Angie earlier to get her perspective on Australia's National Day, plus the rundown on Perth's Australia Day events this year. Sandy, thanks for your time. How important is Australia Day to you this year?
Thanks, Sarah. I think Australia Day is important every year, but particularly this year when we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and yet here in Perth and much of the rest of Australia, we're able to go about our normal lives. We're so fortunate, and I think it's important to remember that today. I think for me personally, I think we need to remember the oldest living culture in the world that we're home to today, our First Nations people, and that's such a key and important part of what this country is today, and celebrate everyone in Australia. And multiculturalism is another important part of Australia. So many of us are migrants to this great country.
What's going to be the highlight of the City of Perth celebrations for you? And do you know how many people are expected to flood into Perth for these events?
As you know, Sarah, we had to cancel the traditional Skyworks show this year due to COVID. But personally, I think this has been a real opportunity to try something different. And this year, the City of Perth created a wonderful program of events over 5 days. It started on Friday with the Hawkers Markets and a show at EQ. Now, the beautiful show at EQ was about the story of the Whadjuk Noongar people of Western Australia. It's a light and water-based show, and it was created by the Elders Advisory Group together with the City of Perth, and I think it's a must-see this weekend. It's on every night, and you have to log on to the Visit Perth website, so it's visitperth.com, to secure your spot. It's free, but you just got to log on for COVID purposes. Other than that, there's a huge program. It's a really diverse program. There's something for everyone.
How important is reconciliation this Australia Day? Do you believe that we can still celebrate Australia Day in its current form and achieve reconciliation?
So I think reconciliation is important every Australia Day, so this Australia Day is no different. Australia Day is for everyone, and so everyone has to be happy celebrating on this day and feel comfortable about it. So this is something that we definitely need to have a conversation about. I think the conversation's already started, and we need to keep talking. There's mixed views in the community, and I think all views need to be respected. And I also think there's just a lot more we can learn. Only a few weeks ago, completed Aboriginal cultural awareness training, and that was really enlightening. I think all of us can learn more about the First Nations people and the oldest living culture in the world, and I think that would really help inform the conversation and where we go from here.
Sandy, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Sarah.
Mark McGowan has maintained WA will not secede from the rest of Australia, stating that he does not support a Waxit movement. The Premier has stood steadfast in his belief of WA being part of Australia, and many believe didn't support Waxit, claiming he'll stay away from the topic. It comes as a newly formed Waxit party launched its election campaign this week, but Mr McGowan says West Australians should be backing the state government.
New upgrades are on the cards for Byford's roads if the McGowan government retains government at the March election. It's committed $18 million to improve the roads for safety and cut travel times while creating 100 jobs. The government says it'll help make the suburb more livable for the fast-growing population.
Cargoditch, Orton and Soldiers Roads will receive an $18 million commitment to upgrades and improvements. This will ensure that local residents in these rapidly urbanising areas have safer opportunities to drive both from here into town and into the city.
Meanwhile, the WA Liberals will up the fight against shoplifting and antisocial behaviour with a small business theft squad. It will have the skills and expertise to track sophisticated retail theft gangs and collate intelligence to support small businesses, all as part of a plan to increase the police force by 1,200 officers.
Artists performing at this year's Fringe Festival are hoping that WA's Harbour will prove just how much WA art scene has to offer to audiences. Sean Sislow is the writer and producer behind What Now, a magical realism double featured about overcoming anxiety. He hopes audiences will leave the show feeling braver. He says the closed border means Fringe is more Western Australian than ever, giving punters the perfect opportunity to support WA artists.
It is extremely important for people to remember to keep seeing things, or to even see one thing. If you weren't going to see anything, it's very important to continue supporting the people who are here and will continue to be here.
What Now is playing at the Girls' School this Thursday, January the 28th. Tickets are available on the Fringe World website.
The first 100 days of a US president's term often sets the administration's tone, and Joe Biden seems no different. On his inauguration, President Biden signed 19 executive orders, reversing several of former President Trump's policies, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization. In his inauguration speech, the new president laid out his priorities, saying he would get to work to get COVID under control, boost the nation's economy, and turn the tide of racial inequality in the US. Google has threatened to pull its internet search services from Australia if our government passes a new media code laws that would force the company to pay media organisations for their news content. Facebook has also told a Senate hearing that if the media laws were passed, banning Australians sharing or posting news on their platform would be their only option. Prime Minister Scott Morrison hit back at the tech giants, saying Australia makes the rules for the things that you can do in Australia.
The new artwork to be displayed at the Coburn train station clock tower has been announced by Transport Minister Rita Saviotti. The piece will replace the decaying and sun-damaged portraits or faces that have long covered the tower. The new design was selected following a public competition. Of the 1,800 votes casted, an astounding 77% voted for the brightly coloured portrait of cockatoos.
If there was an issue around Coburn that was raised continuously, was about those faces. And everyone driving down that freeway, as I said, no one was quite sure who they were and why they were there. But now having a beautiful piece of art, a really bright, and I think what I really like about it, it's bright, it's colourful, depicting Western Australia.
And that's our weekly news and current affairs. You can always read the latest stories on our website, wamnews.com.au.
Until next Sunday evening, from Sarah and myself, we wish you good health and good night.
Take care.